Oh, hello, I didn't see you there. My name is Abe Hunter, and I'm the founder of the Lead Society. I am coming to you from not a round table, but my Steinway. It's a Steinway, folks. I'd like to, without further ado and wasting anybody else's time, go ahead and introduce my fantastic co-host today, composer in residence at Leader Alive, Kurt Erickson. Kurt, how are you?
Hey, I'm great, Abe. Thank you so much for inviting me today. This is fantastic.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, and what's going on in San Fran. Now, your hair looks perfectly like you took the trolley all over today. Is that what people do there?
Well, yes, that's what they do, but no, this is quarantine. This is quarantine hair.
Oh, okay.
No question.
You did have rice aroni for dinner, right?
Yes, of course I did.
Now, before we get started with our guest today, you're also an accomplished composer with Leader Alive. Now, you won some sort of award with some organization called NATS.
Yes, I did. Thank you for that. Yes.
And we can get Mr. Davis, who is our guest today, who won the Pulitzer Prize to get
Yeah, little small little awards.
questions about that. All right, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest today, composer, pianist, and Pulitzer Prize winner, Mr. Anthony Davis. And let's see if we can just welcome him. Okay. Okay. Let's see here. Mr. Davis is taking his time today. Oh, there we go. Mr. Davis?
Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey,
Yes,
did you hear that applause?
it's deafening.
Yeah, great to see all of you today. Mr. Davis, you are a Pulitzer Prize winner. How does that feel?
No, it feels good. It was a surprise because when they announce the Pulitzer, they don't like give you a heads up. They don't call you first or something. It's like they announce it to the press, so you find out actually from the press, and you so you don't actually. I guess they make an announcement online on something. So, but I'm usually oblivious to those things. I was in a faculty meeting with my colleagues, on online on a Zoom, and then I got this call. I said, "Well, it's from New York. I better pick it up." And it was Frank O'Terry from New Music USA, and he said, "Well, congratulations." And I said, "For what?" So they said, "Well, you won the Pulitzer Prize." So I said, I said, "What? Are you kidding?" So I yelled out to my wife, and I didn't realize I was still on Zoom with my all the
No, no, between
big Zoom faux pas.
no, no, I want you to really remember how that felt and compare it to how it feels to be on the round table. When you got that call, were you like, were you also yelling to your wife, honey?
Yeah, honey, I won the Pulitzer Prize. Yeah, like no, it was funny. Steve Schick told me it was the ultimate Zoom bomb.
Yeah, I would think so, huh?
Yeah, but it was cool. I was excited because I've been doing political work for a long time, and I think that to realize that someone can be acknowledged in this way who does that kind of work. So maybe we'll encourage other people to stretch out and venture into the political realm too. So that it's because it's important that we be aware of what's going on as artists and composers.
Yeah, the timing's impeccable, isn't it?
Yeah,
Really.
definitely, yeah. And also the fact that I had Trump in the opera too. That was weird. So, so
I was gonna ask you about that, but you already started just a couple minutes into the interview. That's,
yeah, I had to put Trump in the opera, because I think of that. The incident with Central Park Five was the beginning of his political career. That's how he established himself, was all based on racial animus and exploiting the racial divide. And and you see that in Central Park Five. And actually, when you listen to Al Sharpton on MSNBC, he always mentions that too. You know, and so that's his playbook, and that's what he's doing in his re-election campaign now.
Well, how surreal must this have been for you? I think I read you started this around 2014 or so, and here you're revisiting history, and Donald Trump is a character in your opera, and then as you're working on this, and then you see him actually become the president of the United States. I mean,
and I was doing the first workshop performance of the opera was the Friday after the election. So that was in Newark, New Jersey. And so I was in rehearsal and coming and driving to Queens from Newark with all this equipment and stuff on the night of the election. So that's when I heard he won. And it was horrifying. And it was really interesting because when we did this performance in Newark on that Friday, when Trump appeared, the guy who plays Trump appeared for his bow at the end of the show, everyone booed. And then they went to applause. It was really funny. It's like they're booing the character. It was like if you had a Renaissance opera and you have this figure of evil, menace. There he was, unequivocal, especially in a mostly Black audience in Newark, New Jersey.
Well, for those of us who haven't had the opportunity to see the opera, how did you portray him? Sort of what prominence did he take in your setting of the story in the opera?
Well, he's not. I wouldn't say he's a major character. He appears later, and actually, sort of into the opera. But it's always very important. Also, in the first draft of the libretto didn't have Trump in it, and it didn't have the DA in it. The female character who's the assistant DA, and I thought that they were very important that both of them be in it because he had sort of a mask figure that sort of stood for everything. But I thought it was very important to have Trump in it because of all what he did during the trial and how he calling for the death penalty. Had had that full page ads and all the Post and the Daily News and everything. Support our police, bring back the death penalty. So I thought it was very important to have him in it as a character, and then have him also interact with the DA and the mask figure. And in doing his music, I made a joke for the college friend of mine. She asked me, "Well, how do you write for Trump?" And I said, "Well, first of all, he's a tenor. I mean, he is a tenor. He listens to his voice. So he's a tenor. Number two, he repeats himself a lot. Okay, so he has to repeat himself a lot. Number three, he never completes a sentence." So I said, that's the guy principle. You have to have him as a tenor that repeats himself and never completes a sentence. But I think I violated it a little bit. I think the libretto was he did complete it because he wasn't as bad. When you listen to him from the late 80s, you can see that how his decline, his mental decline is quite clear. He can actually speak in paragraphs.
Yeah.
In the 80s, I mean, he was somewhat coherent, but
you're right.
Now it's not there. I mean, it's quite evident.
Yeah, you're right.
Anthony, I have a question from one of our listeners or viewers. Was the mask idea part of your writing for the opera, or was that initiative by the director, the stage director?
Now, but the mask was the librettist concept. He had the concept of the mask from the beginning. And it was even more prominent in the earlier phases of the libretto. As I said, the mask was also the Trump and also the DA. And but I thought it was important to differentiate those. So the mask was a central figure from the beginning, and the thought was also that he sort of represented in the opera. He had a coat with all these racial invective on his jacket. Sort of like if you think of Jungle Fever or something like that. One of Spike Lee's movies, So this idea of sort of representing kind of race hate, race hatred, et cetera, and how it manifests in the police, it manifests itself in the press, it manifests itself also in the legal system and the judge. All those figures in the opera are represented by the mask.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe that even in the run-up to the election, I think that Trump even sort of stood by his original statements,
Yeah,
even after they'd been exonerated, right?
That's right. He said they shouldn't. He was against the settlement that the city made with the five, and he said, well, they weren't angels. They were no angels. That's what he said. Something like that. So no, he still hasn't he's never apologized for anything. So first of all, his rule of thumb comes from Roy Cohn. He's actually totally kind of a pupil of Roy Cohn in that regard. You don't apologize for anything, and I think that if you look at I looked at a recent documentary about Roy Cohn that was done by actually the granddaughter of the Rosenbergs. And so it was very, very interesting, because to see Roy Cohn's playbook and what he did as the model for Trump, I think Trump comes right out of that.
Now, Anthony, another question, and we were actually just discussing this off air. Are we able to watch this anywhere?
Watch the opera? Yeah. You can't see the whole opera because, union rules, et cetera. We did do a documentary video of the production. You can see excerpts of it that have been available online that the opera company's made available, so that's important. And I was able to submit the video for grants, et cetera, so people could see it. When I did the submission for the Pulitzer Prize, I could submit the whole video of the opera, so they saw the whole thing. But I wish the public could see it. I'm hopeful that it'll be done again soon, and we hopefully we'll do a recording in another year or so, within the year.
Yeah. Anthony, so I have a question for you. In another interview, I heard you talk about sort of in your childhood when you were younger about wanting to write an opera before you had even actually heard an opera.
Right.
So I'm wondering, maybe you can talk a little bit about your beginnings as a composer. I think it's always sort of fascinating to kind of hear how different creatives sort of emerge and develop.
A lot of that stuff, a lot of it happened in the same year. I mean, I started to really compose and really to improvise too as a jazz musician, and discovered the idea of doing an opera, of the become fascinated with that. All happened in the same year in 10th grade, when I was living in Italy for the year for 10th grade. And I had this fabulous teacher who came as an English teacher for the school, and he had come over to Italy to go to North American College to become a priest. And then he fell in love with a woman, and he decided God was dead, and he ended up at my school teaching. So
that sounds like an opera right there, doesn't it?
so he decided he had a class for the 10th grade, because it was a small school. So he had a class for the 10th through 12th grade. I was in 10th grade, a philosophy class. So the philosophy class basically was existentialism. That was the class. And so I remember I read Nietzsche and Kierkegaard and then Sartre and other writers, et cetera. But the Nietzsche really and the Kierkegaard really struck me, reading Birth of Tragedy, and then Either Or as well. And I was really fascinated with in Birth of Tragedy with the conception of opera, looking at the Dionysian and the Apollonian kind of duality and binary. And I thought, when I thought about it, and at the same time, I was really getting into jazz at the time. I was a classical pianist when I left Pennsylvania and went to Italy. But when I got there, my dad was, someone as a joke gave my dad a record, Monk in Italy, Thelonious Monk in Italy. So I listened to the record and I fell in love with the music. And I was fascinated with Monk because he was a composer too. So I learned everything on the record. And then so in Italy they have these record stores where you could you could preview all the records, and the records would come on a conveyor belt, and you could listen to the record first. So I would listen to 3 or 4 jazz records and then buy one, you know. So I listened to Miles Davis records and Coltrane records and and Thelonious Monk records and Charles Mingus records. So I began a whole study of particularly of 60s jazz, you know, because it was that year I was doing it was 66, 67. So that's when I sort of began to learn it. And then I practiced a lot in the Steinway store that was in Torino, Italy. And they had really beautiful Steinway C's and D's and stuff. So I'd go and get to play. So at first I was playing Beethoven and Schumann and Chopin and stuff like that. But then I played one day. I played a Monk tune on it, and everyone, it was like, oh wow, you could do it. So I started playing like Monk tunes, Ruby My Dear, and then some other stuff, and then so I started learning that, and so I did a couple of concerts in Italy where I did a classical program for half of it, and then I did a Monk tune, and I did my originals, my first original compositions at that time. So that was sort of the beginning of that. And at the same time, in this philosophy class, I was becoming interested in opera and thinking about that someday I'd like to write an opera.
Wow. What were the first pieces? Were they, because you sort of had these dual interests in classical and jazz, were your first pieces, were they more jazz-like? Were they more classical, or were they kind of hybrid?
They were hybrid, more like, I don't know, I describe it kind of Chopin meets Coltrane, kind of. I mean, it was definitely Chopin was big part of it too, because I was, so I wrote these, kind of melody stuff, melodic stuff, but the other thing was they were in weird meters too. Like some reason I was always thinking in terms of, 11s and 7s and 5s and stuff. So it was in different meters. And so that's when I started. I guess I just did that naturally. It's something that just came out. I was always thinking in terms of different meters and time signatures.
Wow. What a great time. I mean, I thought my 10th grade was pretty good, but I think you've got all of us beat. I mean, that sounds idyllic.
Pretty great. Italy was pretty. It was great. It was a great place, and I think a lot of it's set to. I mean, I was a mess when I returned because I was this existentialist who thought that, well, what would I care what grades I get? It doesn't mean anything. No, but I was like interested in. I became very, very more introverted than I was before, and like prior to going to Italy, I was like I was thinking I was going to be a lawyer and a politician, and I was interested in politics, and that's something I've always been interested in. And then when I returned from Italy, by then I pretty much knew that I was going in an artistic direction somehow, whether it was writing or doing music. I knew it was going to be something like that.
Well, that's the curse of visiting Italy, I think, is that it ruins your life. Or you won the Pulitzer.
It was funny. No, it was funny. So, I tried to write a novel too, but hey, the music kind of stuck.
Listen to a clip from Central Park 5. How about you? Anyone? Should we listen to a clip from Central Park 5?
Yes, let's do it.
All right, let's
do it.
Listen to, this is Corey's aria. Coming up for you folks. Here we go. Sorry, my dog is going insane about something. All of them, the police, but who's gonna pay me back? They stole my mind, my happiness.
gonna pay me back? Who's gonna put back the chunks of me that were ripped out? All I ever wanted was for truth to come shining through. I need everyone to know. But now that the truth has come, why does it hurt more than the lie that brought me so low?
Okay.
Wow. Lovely. Powerful.
So, Anthony, when I was listening to some of your previous works, I mean, there's just such a range of sometimes tonal, sometimes not so tonal, sometimes jazz, sometimes not so jazz. But this is just, that aria is just gorgeous. Can you talk about your approach and your musical style, if you can define it, how you define it?
Well, it varies. It's also in terms of the process, even, like the process of writing that aria was quite different from other parts of the opera. It's when I decided to kind of follow my melodic ear first. Like the melody came first, and then I thought of how I was setting it up. And a lot of times when I was writing because I deal so much with rhythmic structures and patterns, etc. So I know kind of like I have an idea of a kind of rhythmic frame, a structure that exists, and so the melody sort of plays with that. I want the melody to have a different kind of rhythmic feel than the underlying rhythm. So that evolves from that. When I started doing X, my first opera, I was really obsessed with rhythmic structures. I had like kind of polyrhythmic structures of meters against each other, and all so that something would resolve every like 108 beats or something like that, or it would be very like I say, oh, this structure's in 25, and this is in 11, and this is in this, and so those notes where the rhythms came together were where could be changed, dramatic change, etc. So a lot of times I had to try to time the rhythmic dimension and the rhythmic drama, how the rhythmic structure worked with how I would imagine the drama unfolding. And so that's true in like Louisa's art, and a lot of different pieces I've done in X were built on that principle.
And Anthony, who was the tenor that we just heard, who was just so fantastic?
That's Nathan Granner, fantastic singer.
Amazing voice.
Yeah.
Now,
can you talk a little bit about the context of the aria we just heard?
Yes, this is when he was released from prison. Corey Wise was different from the other five in that he was in adult prison because he was tried as an adult because he was a year older. He was 16. The others were 15, etc. So he was tried as an adult. And so he was in prison in Auburn Prison in New York for 13 years. The others were in juvenile detention for 7 years. So his punishment was much more severe. And also his experience being in an adult prison as a young person in adult prison was horrifying. So when he was released, he had, so this feeling of that his experience was very different from the others. In fact, when I look at the interviews from Corey Wise, they talk about the five as if we all were the same, but I'm the one. I'm the one who had to pay the most, who had to be in prison, etc. And you know, I wear the scars of that experience. You know, so he talks about that, and also it's telling because he met the actual murderer in prison. So Matias Reyes, who was actually not actually a murderer, who was one who was assaulted Trisha Miele in the park, eventually confessed to the crime, and that's how they were exonerated. But he actually met him in Rikers before he was taken to Auburn prison, and they had a fight. They got in a fight. You know, so at that point, he didn't know he was the person who actually committed the crime, but later he confessed to the crime, and that's how Corey Wise was finally released, and they were all exonerated because they had him in custody at the same time they had the fight, but they never thought to test him, and actually DNA tests proved that he was the perpetrator.
And Corey never knew at the time when they were both in prison. It wasn't until much later.
But in the opera, they meet. We had him come to Corey and say, "Well, you spent all this time," and he's kind of born again. So Matias Reyes was born again, so he was trying to confess. You know, he's trying to tell him. He never can get it out quite. Tell Corey, but then he tells the mass figure that he's the one who committed the crime. And so I thought that was, you know, operatic license, you know, because originally we didn't have that in the story. We had a whole nother character come in, but I said, no, I think we should take the license here to have them make this confrontation to see the confrontation and have it come out that he's trying to tell him that he's the one who did it and that you spend all this time in prison for nothing.
But even the fact that they did know each other in prison and they actually fought, I mean, that's incredible. That's operatic right there.
Right, exactly. So I thought I made the meeting much later because we actually met in prison early in his tenure and early in the time he was in prison. So that I think that helped in terms of the telling of the story and also getting to kind of telescoping what actually happened.
Let's jump into another musical clip from Central Park 5. Here we go, folks.
The world is ours, hold your head high. This world is ours, stand up, step up, this world is ours. When you pretend not to see, not to hear, stop acting like you have something to fear. Our love is my home. Our love, where you're never alone.
Yeah.
That's just there's something about five men, let alone 5 black men, singing that's just incredible.
Yeah, that was fun to watch. It's kind of an anthem in a way, you know. And Harlem, of course, is evoked in the piece so many times. And a lot of times I was thinking of Ellington's Harlem Suite. You know, like the opening third interval that opens the suite. You know, so I was trying to give a little shout out to Duke and some of that.
I'm glad that you mentioned that because I did hear Ellington. I'm not familiar with that particular piece, but when I was watching some of the, I think it was the first act, it struck me how much that I really hear Ellington in this music.
Yeah. Well, you know, because every time I think of Harlem, and I think in a nostalgic way of looking at Harlem, you know, I think of Duke, and I think of the statue of 106th Street, you know, and you know, his love of Harlem. You know, he wrote so much music, you know, from Harlem Air Shaft to, you know, all the pieces that evoke different parts of Harlem, and the way he thought of Harlem as this, you know, wondrous, almost magical place, you know. And so I was, in a way, it was to juxtapose to his Harlem to the Central Park Five's Harlem.
Mm.
And so that was kind of interesting, hip hop Harlem as opposed to Duke Harlem.
Yeah.
So Harlem in the 30s and 40s, and I wrote the aria at the beginning. The mass sings this thing, Harlem, a black and tan fantasy. Now, the librettist wrote Harlem, a black and tan fantasy. So what am I supposed to do? I mean, first of all, Black and Tan Fantasy is a great Duke Ellington composition from 1927. So actually, I used a thing from Black and Tan later in the piece when they're in prison. They have this stop time thing, which is actually what he did behind Bubba Miley's solo in Black and Tan Fantasy. So I kind of put that in there as to remind people because of the mention of Black and Tan from earlier.
Now, Anthony, do you usually decide that you want to write an opera and look for a topic, or do you have an event in mind, or perhaps a political idea or statement that you wish to explore, and then how do these operas come to you, and how do you decide to write them?
Well, I have a million ideas for operas, so it's not. I have a lot of ideas, so I have operas in my head. I have operas that I want to write, like that have to do with different subjects, they come from different things, and so how things come to the fore. Well, Central Park Five was a little different in that I was given a libretto. I hadn't thought about doing an opera about Central Park Five, but Kevin Maynard runs Trilogy Opera in Newark, that opera company I mentioned. Asked me to read a libretto of Central Park Five to see if I could recommend a composer for it. So I read the libretto by Richard Wesley, and I said, "Well, I want to do it."
I happen to know somebody that's available.
I said, "I want to do that," because I think also I felt that I was intrigued by the mass figure, and then. I wanted to add Trump and other things to it. So I started working with Richard, and we worked very well together. So that worked out very well. Other times, sometimes I get ideas from the librettists. X is something my brother was in a play called El Haj Malik, where he played Malcolm X in a play. My brother's an actor and a director. And so I went to the play. It was at Yale Drama School. And so he came backstage and he said, the autobiography is, be great if you could do a musical about Malcolm X. I mean, Malcolm X talks about music all the time in the libretto, in the autobiography. And there are all these references to music because he hung out with musicians. He hung out, when he was a hustler during that whole period. So he said also that the music could reflect the history of jazz from the 40s to the 60s, reflects the progression of Malcolm X progression and the political progression. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, yeah, that's kind of a cool idea, but I think it's an opera. It's an opera because it treats a tragic hero. And that goes back to the Wagner stuff. I said, okay, so who's our tragic hero? Like Siegfried, here it is, Malcolm X. He goes through this transformation. He changes names from Malcolm Little to Detroit Red to Malcolm X to El Haj Malik El Shabazz. So I know this is whole journey that he goes through. This is an operatic story, yeah. So that's when I started. And then I worked with Talani, my cousin Talani Davis, who wrote the libretto, who's a wonderful poet. So we began, that was sort of the genesis of that.
Now, Anthony, you mentioned earlier, with regard when we heard that clip from Central Park Five about an anthem, and it just so happens that I understand that this project still hasn't been announced yet, but I can say that we know that you're writing an anthem, as somebody told me.
Right.
And I'm sorry to break that here, folks, but that's the Lead Society difference. So what can you tell us about it? And I understand that your cousin Tulani will be writing the libretto, the text.
Yeah, we've been working on the text. We've gone through like 3 or 4 versions of the text now, and now I'm pretty satisfied. I'm ready to really write music because I first, I was looking at the structure of it. And it was interesting. It's interesting because she said, "Well, you want it in 4 lines or you want it in 6 lines?" So I said, "Well, I don't know. Guess 4, 6 lines." Then I decided I really hearing it in 4s or 8s. So I think the text is in a shape enough now I can really start to work on the music because I was sort of waiting to have the words. Because the words have to work. The words have to work, and also it's referring to everything. George Floyd, all the things that happened in Minneapolis, and also other instances around this whole history of violence.
And how does one start writing an anthem? How does one become inspired? What is your inspiration aside from, of course, George Floyd and this wonderful text from your cousin? How do we create an anthem for the 21st century?
Well, I think that's very interesting. For one thing, you have to come up with some kind of direct melody, something that speaks directly, and that's interesting. I've written a couple anthems before, like in Central Park 5 and X. I wrote "We Are a Nation," which was this kind of thing. I consider kind of a Black nationalist anthem, like or a Nation of Islam anthem or something, so I started thinking about that, how I guess it's different from, it's not going to be like the Star Spangled Banner or like or the Black national anthem or anything like that, but you have to think about having a melody that's memorable, that sticks, and then also, kind of a refrain, something where something comes together, and that has the ultimate feeling of being uplifting, and that's the thing. So it's very funny. It's funny how I gravitate for a key. If I listened to that, because it was why'd I write an anthem in F minor? You know what I mean?
Hey, F minor is a good key.
Oh, I love F minor. It's so funny because my other one was a D flat major, so it's like okay. I think I like those Strayhorn keys.
So, you heard it here first, folks. We have something going on, but enough serious talk here. I can't do enough more of that. Now, actually, we're going to get more serious, folks. We're going to play a little game. All right, and this is called. We're gonna view some pictures of Anthony Davis from his past.
Oh.
They're not mugshots. Don't worry, folks. We weren't able to get access to those at the last minute. But we're going to view 3 photos of Anthony, and we're going to talk about them and reminisce.
Armchair back, 'cause it's photo throwback.
Don't worry, folks. Anthony Davis did not write that.
I didn't either, for the record.
Yeah,
Composers here.
Okay. Here we go. So,
and Anthony, I don't know what to expect either right now, so it's new to me as well.
Oh yeah, this is a surprise for everyone. Hold on, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm going to play the theme one more time while I get this. Talk amongst yourselves.
Okay.
Armchair back, 'cause it's photo throwback.
All right, here we go. All right, I'm pulling up the PowerPoint here because we're high tech here at the Lead Society. We use nothing but the best PowerPoint. Microsoft, thank you, Bill Gates. All right, Anthony, what can you tell us about this photo?
I think that was, I'm trying to remember what it was for. I think I was doing it was a publicity shot when I was Yeah, it was early, like it must have been from the 80s or something like that.
I would say early 2000s.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's weird.
Right.
Yeah, it's in the weird shirt. Yeah, okay.
All right.
Yeah, see, the thing is, then I had the fro. I mean, but I have better pictures. I have some pictures where I have the monster fro, but that was a more contained fro than I.
Well, I mean, and quite contained. I mean, it has a matte finish, which I think is impressive.
It's a great picture.
All right, so here's Exhibit B, photo throwback.
Yeah, that's the full bull effect.
Yeah.
Now that's a great photo.
That's intense.
That's intense. Yeah.
Now you must have been a very young man during this photo.
Yeah. I was like angry black man phase. Yeah, that was definitely the fro. Yeah, I guess I was trying to be serious. You know, the piano. I'm at the piano. Where I'm trying to think of. It looks like it's ECA or something. It might be.
It looks like you're at a very nice steakhouse, actually.
Yeah, I think it actually may be. Yeah, I'm trying to think of where it is. Yeah.
Were you in Manhattan?
Yeah. So. Yeah, well, I used to have a monster fro because I was like Angela Davis fro. And it was so wild because I didn't have it like perfectly coiffed and stuff, so I had little tangles in it and stuff. So I was pretty wild. My mother couldn't stand it. My mother,
That's great.
To the point that when I fell asleep on her couch one day, she took out the clippers and cut some of my hair. I woke up, my hair was on a newspaper in the floor. So
all right.
I thought that was a real violation. You know? But anyway.
Here's our final and third example. Here we go, folks. Now.
Dude. Yeah.
That's great.
Now, many of our listeners have been writing in. They want to know if you still have that sweater, and if so, I mean, can they still get it?
Well, actually, that's a shirt.
Oh,
that's a shirt. It's a very elaborate thing. I don't think I still have that shirt. But
damn.
Yeah, but it's one of my gig shirts I wear on concerts when I play.
Now, this must have been late 80s.
I specialize in having weird shirts. I would wear these different shirts. You know, because I hated jackets. Because as a pianist, I hate wearing jackets.
Yeah,
I just hate that feeling of being confined and the arms can't move. And so I like loose shirts that were able to let me really play. So that was what I was going for. So I would always like buy special shirts.
And I noticed the fro is quite modest.
Yes,
if not a little wet.
Oh, I don't think it's a Jerry curl there, but
okay.
You know, no, it's just it's a little coiffed.
Yeah. Abe, I think it's a composer thing. I'm waiting for some musicologists to do a study about the size of hair and the quality of works, because I think that there's a direct relationship there. The bigger the hair, the better the music.
You know,
what do you think, Anthony?
Samson effect. Cut the hair off, man. It's gone. That's it. That's it. You forget it. You have nothing left.
Well, you guys, that was a fun game of photo throwback. Here we go.
Armchair back, because it's photo throwback.
All right.
No, yeah, that's right. I actually agree with you about the hair. That was a big thing. So I keep fighting my wife to bring the hair throwback.
I'm in full support.
And actually started with the COVID thing because I couldn't go to the barber or anything. It started to come back. It was coming back, and I told my son has hair like Odell Beckham. He has the white. Yeah. He has this whole other thing, and he's a professional athlete, so he has to mag. It's a completely different thing. So, but he would prove that I would have the throwback. So, but then my wife actually brought someone to cut our hair, and we were outside cutting our hair. She couldn't stand my hair.
You were robbed before it could even blossom.
I had this long. Oh man, I had the fro. The fro was coming
back. You could have been back in business. You could have got the angry face on again, and
I had the fro back, and I won the Pulitzer Prize. Hey, see what happened?
Okay, well, let me play that theme one more time. Just listen to this. I had this written today, Paul Schaefer style.
Arch your back, 'cause it's photo throwback.
All right. Do we have any more serious questions for Pulitzer Prize winner Anthony Davis? Have we wasted enough of your time, Anthony?
That's okay. I'm cool. This is fun.
Yeah. I did want to ask him about his jazz influences.
Well, I'm sorry, we don't have time for that tonight, actually.
Okay.
My jazz influences.
Yeah, no, I am curious about how you incorporate more of your jazz mindset and improvisation into written out classical pieces, and how does that work when you're dealing with classical musicians who maybe aren't really that comfortable improvising? How do you kind of thread that needle?
Well, first thing, I usually import musicians. I usually bring musicians in who are specialists, who understand the idiom. So, in Central Park 5, I had a core group of improvisers within the ensemble, people who could, read the music, but also interpret what I want in terms of improvisation. And that's been a very important part of all my operas on some level, Now I work with some special people like J.D. Perrin, a wonderful clarinet player who plays contralto clarinet too. So I've written a lot of music for him, and but this in my operas as well, where I'm really thinking of him. So I like to think of some of the parts I write for in the opera, even in the operas, were written for particular people, like Mark Dresser, a bass player. I've written for him. Michael Desson, who's played trombone in the Central Park 5. And prior to that was George Lewis or Ray Anderson, great trombone players I work with. So a lot of it is thinking about the particular people, the way Ellington did. Ellington wrote for Johnny Hodges and Cootie Williams, and I think that's important. That's an important part of it. And I do that with singers as well. When I wrote for Thomas Young, who did Elijah and Street and X, after I heard his voice and he was in other operas of mine, I really started to write with his instrument in mind, how his voice sounds. And I do that with particular singers too. I hear how they sound and what I think they would sound like in my music.
Anthony, do you ever, in the jazz idiom, do you ever, and work how it transcends classical music, do you let your singers ever improvise?
Yes. Well, Thomas Young, yes, because he's a great scat singer. Great. I mean, he's like Ella Fitzgerald with that.
Oh, wow.
But he can also sing, Gounod's Faust, or sing Daughter of the Regiment aria and stuff like that. So I had improvised moments for him in X and in Amistad. I haven't done it too much there's some in Lilith, my opera Lilith, there's for the soprano. There's some sound things I want, multiphonic things that they have to find themselves, because it's sort of up to their individual instrument. I don't want to impose something that would be stressful on the voice or hurt. But if they find a way to do what I want, kind of what I want, I think that works. But I think I do try to incorporate. I bring an improviser aesthetic to my composition. So I think about individual sound and think about how people play and think about what they like to play. I mean, so and how they how they sing and what the particular qualities of the voice are. I mean, that's something I really think about. And I think sometimes composers make the mistake of writing generic music. If you write generic music, Mozart didn't write generic music. He wrote for particular people. So when you write for people, then you also create a standard for what kind of performance there should be of your music. So if you go into saying, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, can't do this. This is the fa for this and all that stuff. That's garbage,
I agree.
Yeah.
Testify, Anthony.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, you're playing to the strengths of your performers too. So ultimately, it's going to be more successful on just a level.
They want to sound good. You want them to sound good. So why? So the idea is that but I think that what it comes about is that as a composer, and that's something you learn from Ellington, and I think a lot of composers have learned from Ellington outside of jazz, quote unquote jazz, is that composition in the 20th century became collaborative.
Yeah,
in a sense that you're working with, whether it's working with extended techniques and what an individual brings to extended techniques, like Bert Turetsky for bass, or Mark Dresser on bass, or any number of people who have very specialized techniques on their instruments. Or so as a composer, you're working in a collaborative world, and that's something that Duke understood completely, in his work with his musicians. And I think he's a model for the modern composer.
And he knew that back in the 40s.
Yep.
Which I think,
and I think that he's a very important model. I mean, in a way that sometimes the racism in the classical world, they don't understand that. I mean, he's the model for Steve Reich, for example, why he has an ensemble. Okay. Or Philip Glass, how they could function as composers working with their own ensembles, et cetera, and why that's important. Or Bang on the Can, that stuff. I mean, it's not really Cage. So I think that so if we're looking at a model from earlier in the 20th century, I mean, I think Ellington's a very important one. And then Mingus too, with his jazz workshop. Mm-hmm. I think he's been a very influential composer for me as well.
If I may, Kurt, I'm sorry, Kurt's here to guest host as the composer, and I'm asking all the hard-hitting questions. What does your catalog look like, Anthony, as far as vocal music to instrumental to symphonic? Have you written song cycles? And I'm asking these questions so you can talk about it, even though I know the answer, because I've done my research, folks, and I'm taking a take to camera one. So everyone knows I'm serious. Hold on. Take to camera one. I'm very serious.
I've written songs. I wrote a long song form called Lost Moon Sisters. That was based on a Diana DePrima poem. And I've worked on a series of songs based on Quincy Troup's poetry. And I've written, chamber music. I've written orchestra music too, including I did a clarinet concerto, piano concerto, Wang 5, which is based on kind of part of my Wang music. I wrote Notes from the Underground, which is a 2-movement piece inspired by Ralph Ellison. So I've done a number of orchestra pieces too. A lot of times I write orchestra pieces and then they get absorbed into my opera sometimes, or I'm working on an opera and I make an orchestra piece out of part of it or something. But I do write that some music like that. And I've written some chamber music as well. I sort of abandoned chamber music for a long time because I was kind of frustrated by chamber music. But I wrote a clarinet piece called "You Have the Right to Remain Silent," which is based on the Miranda statement. So it's a 4-movement piece for a clarinet and large ensemble with electronics.
Wow!
So I've done a number of different pieces like that. I've done choral music too. I did a piece, "Voyage Through Death to Life Upon These Shores," which is a setting of Robert Hayden poem "Middle Passage," which is about the slave trade. And so I also wrote a piece called "Restless Morning" that was written after 9/11, which was premiered in 2002, which is a 4-movement work, with using poetry by Quincy Troup, and also 1 movement with words by Alan Havis, playwright, and then a 100-second song.
Now, this anthem you're writing, which is Top Secret. What's the title of that?
Of which?
Of the Top Secret anthem you're composing?
I don't know. It's changing, man. July it's changing.
Oh my God!
Let me look at it. The first one, just a second. Just a second. I have to look at it because I just got it, so I've got to look at the.
You guys, everyone, this is a Lead Society exclusive here, ladies and gentlemen.
You heard it here first, huh?
Yep.
Okay. I know. I don't want to get it wrong. See, that's the thing. So let me just look. Okay, 1 second.
While you research that, Mr. Davis, I just want to talk about next week. We have a great show. We have the fantastic mezzo-soprano Stephanie Blythe with us on the program.
Wow.
I mean, hey, we're just the Modest Lead Society here, doing what we can. Changing people one art song at a time, folks. And I did promise. No. I hope you put the kids to bed early next week because we are saying the F word a lot next episode. I promise, Stephanie. We also have her longtime collaborative partner and one of the greatest pianists there is, Mr. Alan Smith, joining us. So I hope you'll all tune in. How are you doing, Anthony?
I'm doing fine. Yeah. I found it. She had. Okay. The last line is, "We bring the change we seek," but it's also she called it, "We call the roll." I don't know about that. See, I wouldn't. I would call it the last phrase, but that's but we have to figure that out.
Well, you do have the Pulitzer now, so that might carry a little bit more weight, perhaps.
No, not with the right relatives. No.
All right, everyone. Well, Anthony, thank you so much for having fun with us tonight and playing the game and talking about your work and giving us a teaser about your latest project, which is Top Secret. But we'll all know more about soon. And to my guest co-host, Kurt Erickson, congratulations on that Nats award you won.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, very good. And if you haven't heard the work, it's fantastic. It truly is, and it's amazing. And anything else you want to say as I play the outro music? Now's your chance.
Yeah.
Anyone you want to say good night to?
I'll say thank you for writing such a wonderful piece, Anthony, and congratulations on the Pulitzer. This is really fantastic on so many levels. Just what we needed right now. Well done. Bravo.
Yeah. Thank you. Congratulations to you too.
Thank you.
And congratulations to me.
And
I did something.
Well done on commissioning a new piece.
That's
from I don't know who.
I don't know.
I mean, it sounds like a good idea.
I do not know what you're talking about. Nothing. Good night, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Tune in next week for Stephanie Blythe. Have a good night.